Many of you know each other because the community of people that have helped to bring this field forward has been remarkable. It's been an incredible mix of health professionals, patients, survivors, advocates, a mix that I think is really somewhat unique and is reflected in the composition of this audience as well as the composition of many of the meeting audiences that those of us who are involved in adolescent young adult oncology go to. It's really been an effort that has been full of passion, tremendous energy. I remarked that every meeting I've been at, every adolescent young adult meeting I've been at, have been some of the most energetic, stimulating meetings that I've been at, and the interactions, networking, discussions that we all have outside of the actual formal presentations have been as valuable to developing our programs as have the formal ones. And I hope that today will not be an exception, that you'll take advantage of the opportunity to talk with what I think are the leaders of the field of AYA oncology, and also some of the leaders of the organizations who are helping to move this field forward. I think it's really a tremendous opportunity to do that, and I certainly hope you take advantage of this. There are several critical factors that led to this symposium. One, of course, is the fact that we all come to recognize that while adolescent and young adults with cancer have a survival, an absolute survival that is better than most older adults, not quite as good as young children, there's been this remarkable finding that you'll hear more about, that the improvement in survival for this group of population has been the lowest of any age group in the United States. The reasons for that are not completely clear, though we have a lot of consensus around some areas. What I hope you will come away with today is that we've learned a lot in the past 13 years since this field really got started in the United States and started in England, the United Kingdom, and Australia, maybe a little before that. We've learned a lot, but boy, do we need data. And I think this was completely obvious at a recent meeting of National Cancer Institute and Livestrong sponsored to follow up on the 2006 Progress Review Group report, which was the white paper that really set forward what we needed to do in this field. It was very obvious at this meeting in the past month and a half, and some of the speakers, in fact, I think just about all the speakers you'll hear from today were there, was that we really have a lot of consensus information, but we have very little data and evidence to back up that consensus. And so one of the messages I wanted to give to all of you today is that this is a tremendous opportunity for research and input into this developing field in many different areas, everything from the characteristics of young adult cancer to the biology of young adult cancers to the psychosocial, economic, and other aspects of the environment that surround the young adult patient with cancer and the impacts of those, to survivorship. Just an incredible amount of research that is needed, and is reflected in the rapid increase in publications in peer-reviewed journals that have been seen in the past 3 or 4 years. So for those of you who are looking at getting involved in AYA oncology, this is a tremendous opportunity to get involved at the ground level and to really contribute to the field and to participate in an effort that will bring tangible results to young people who really need them. So I want to make that pitch to you. Here at USC, and we're not going to really talk very much today about our USC program, but I just wanted to mention a couple aspects. We are developing an adolescent young adult program. We're one of the few academic centers in the country that are doing so. There'll be more as we move along, but we've been actively working on this for for the past 3 years. Our clinical program will launch on Monday, so this is really our, if you will, our coming out celebration for the launch of our clinical program. But we've already started programs in the areas of education and research. As an example, among you are some of the students of our second-year medical school AYA program, in which students spend a summer doing research with an AYA mentor, and then the first semester of the second year seeing patients with mentors and discussing with us the aspects of AYA oncology. Really early in their education, sometimes it's their first really in-depth clinical experience, and I think if you talk with them, they'll tell you about the impact this has had, as they eloquently did yesterday when we met with the Stroud family. We have our first AYA fellow post hematology oncology training. Again, one of the very, very few programs that have started, and this is an organized program with a curriculum that have started in the country. We have our first fellow this year who's here, Chelsea Collins, and we are beginning to recruit for our next year's fellow. We have research projects, and you will see some of the posters out in the foyer. I hope you take the opportunity to see them, that we've already started with our summer students as well as with our faculty. And I don't want to steal any thunder, but Dennis Deepen, who is one of the foremost cancer epidemiologists and the individual who oversees the California Tumor Registry for this area, is going to be coming out with a monograph shortly on AYA cancer in Southern California. It will be a reference piece that I think is going to be used throughout the country. It's really the first comprehensive look at a population for AYA oncology since the SEER report in 2000 that really triggered this whole field. So exciting stuff going on here. We're looking forward to the clinical program launching and really contributing as much as we can to the knowledge and well-being of these patients. I will say more about the other reason this symposium is occurring, or the reason it's able to occur, and that is the Stroud family and their support and enthusiasm and contribution. I'll do all of that a little bit later when I introduce them later in the program. But I want to ask them to stand, Jackie and Dan and Rachel, just so you can recognize them. You'll hear more about their story from them a little bit later, and I will tell you it's quite a story, and you will understand why we're having this symposium after you hear from them. They can say it a lot better than I can. I also want to thank the planning committee that worked on this program. We've been working for about almost a year on this program, so maybe I could have just asked the committee to stand and hold your applause till I finish. My co-medical director, Debu Trepathy. Debu, you're here, I know. Please stand up. Leo Mascarenas from Children's Hospital, Leo. David Fryer. David's here, I know, from Children's. Kathy Riccioni. Kathy, are you here? Yeah, I know she's here. Tina Johan and Kristen Rasmussen from our development staff at Children's. Laurel Barash, who's our coordinator for AYA program. And then I also want to thank Brooke Glazer and the development team here at USC, who has also been involved in helping us both with the program and with this effort. And finally, before I introduce our next person for comments, I want to express personally and on behalf of all of you my thanks to the speakers today. We have an outstanding group of speakers today representing the founders and leadership of the AYA oncology effort in this country, and I'll be introducing each of them a little bit later, so I won't go through them now, but I just want to tell you it's a remarkable group, and to be able to get them all here in one place at the same time is a minor miracle, and it's because of their passion and and their efforts to try to develop this field that they're all here today. So I just want to thank all of you for being here, and I'll be introducing each of you in a few minutes. Now I'd like to introduce our Cancer Center Director, Steve Gruber, who really is responsible in part for why we're having our AYA program. We presented this program initially to the Cancer Center leadership group, and not knowing what the response would be. You know, it's hard to get new programs going. Money is tight. We are all busy on our priorities. It was incredible that we had so much enthusiasm among every one of the areas of our cancer center, from basic scientists to clinicians. It was really, to epidemiologists, it was remarkable, and that's why this program has really gotten going. And Dr. Gruber, in addition to being our Cancer Center Director, is a leading researcher in the area of cancer genetic predisposition syndromes and predisposition genes. And it's particularly an area of interest in the AYA population because we know, as in pediatric populations, that there's a higher incidence of these predisposition genes being involved in the cancers of young people than there are in older people. So this is a population I know he's very interested in from a research standpoint. So without further ado, Steve.
Well, welcome to one of the world's great comprehensive cancer centers. It's a pleasure to have you all here. And as we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of the USC Norris Comprehensive Cancer Center, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the USC Norris for what will be a great day for our AYA program. As you may know, not only is it the 40th anniversary of our cancer center, it's a special privilege for us because we were the first. In fact, when the National Cancer Institute designated its program to develop a comprehensive cancer center network, we were one of the original outposts, the first in California, the first in Los Angeles, and we like being first, and we are really pleased to be the first to make this type of commitment to our adolescent and young adult program. Overall, our cancer center, as some of you know, has 257 members on 3 campuses. That's here at the USC Norris Cancer Center, it's at our CHLA campus, and it's at our University Park campus. And it's organized into a series of programs that is all specifically committed to our single mission. And our mission is to make cancer a disease of the past by integrating research, education, and personalized medical care. That is what we can accomplish with our adolescent and young adult program. And I would just say that this AYA program is incredibly important to our cancer center. It's incredibly important to me, and I know it's important to you. Debu and I were talking earlier this morning about what are the things that we can actually learn together from this adolescent and young adult program. And I will tell you that I think Debu hit it right on the head when he said, Steve, what we're going to be able to do is learn how to take care of all cancer patients better because of what we learn from our adolescent and young adult program. If you think about it, it really serves as the paradigm of how we can integrate multidisciplinary care, all of the psychosocial elements that are really required. Think about reproduction, fertility, the full complexity of the human beings that we're taking care of here to truly make cancer a disease of the past. And I'll also just make one other brief comment and remark. This is incredibly important to me. And it's important to me not only because, in addition to my research interests in cancer genetics, where certainly young cancers play a very predominant role, I see these patients in clinic. On Monday, I saw 2 AYA patients, and they had a diverse and complex set of needs that really requires the support of an AYA program. So to have all of you here, my colleague and friend Brad Ziebrecht from the University of Michigan, and a series of outstanding investigators and colleagues, all committed to being here on a Saturday morning. You are here for a reason, and that's because we really can make a difference in this room. The USC Norris simply could not be more committed to seeing this program succeed. And I just want to thank you all for being here and welcome you to a wonderful day to celebrate the inauguration of our adolescent and young adult program.
Thank you very much, Steve. You can see one of the tremendous benefits we have here in having such understanding of the issues and support in developing this program. So we're very, very fortunate to have Steve and his enthusiastic support. I want to now move on to the program, and our first speaker is absolutely fitting to be the first speaker because he is recognized by all of us in the field as truly the father of this field, the person who really got us started in focusing on this area, the person who asked the question, why is the survival, improvement in survival not as good? What's going on in this field? What are the characteristics? Archie Blyer has had many iterations of his career. He's kind of I would say, a renaissance a pediatric oncologist, because not only is he trained in pediatric oncology, he's also trained in radiation therapy. And his career in AYA oncology really began after he completed his time as the Children's Oncology Group chair, and could have very easily taken it easy and rested on his laurels, but that's not Archie. Archie took on the AYA problem, got us all stimulated and excited and involved. I think every one of us in this field has been touched by Archie. We've certainly been touched by his slides, because he shares every one of his slides with us, and so you see parts of his talks in every talk we give. It's just absolutely amazing what he does. He's been, as a clinician, he's been working as the clinical research director for Defeat Cancer, which is a program up in Bend, Oregon, where he lives now. But he is all over the country in terms of his leadership of AYA cancer, and instrumental in developing many of the organizations and the research activities and even the programs that are involved. So I'll stop at that point. I could spend all morning talking about Archie, but I'm going to let him speak and tell you about what progress we've made in this field since we started investigating and trying to understand what's happened, a lot of which has been done due to his efforts and his stimulation. Archie? I'll do it, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah. This shows you this is my challenge area, guys. So I want to make sure that was up on the screen before. We want to encourage you to interact with us and send us your suggestions, your questions that you may want to ask of the panels that we'll have later. And you can do that on Twitter using hashtag Dave25, okay? Hashtag Dave25. So please feel free during the meeting to send us questions, suggestions. We really welcome them, and questions you want us to ask when we get to the panel discussions.
Yeah, I will be in a moment. Yes, yeah, figure out how to get this. Okay, stick that in my pocket. Okay, good morning. Don't underestimate the contributions of the person who was at this lectern, introduced your cancer center director, because Stuart had a lot to do with why we're here too. He set the standards for AYA programs with a publication with colleagues in the Live Strong Young Adult Alliance. Co-chaired the Cure Search effort, helped us get funds, and I'll show you a little more about that, to get us all started nationally. So write down hashtag Dave25. That was on the screen. That's the Twitter address to comment on today's events. Hashtag Dave25. 25 was Dave's basketball number. So all of what you heard is okay, but the most important thing I didn't hear Stuart say was, I used to dunk baskets too. In my dreams. That's fact. I really did. So Dave has more than a minimal effect on me, for sure, for sure. So you're going to hear from Dan and Jackie and Rachel. I didn't hear Rachel's boyfriend, Ed, introduce Krim. He's here as well, Krim. So we'll get into a bit of that. I never like to give the same talk twice. I just can't do it. I have to find more data, the data that we lack that Stuart referred to. So there's quite a bit of new data up here. And I may stumble, because this will be a first time to try to convey some new ideas. I will also talk about the good and the bad, and I'll try to be polarizing us towards doing more or less of some of the things that has happened. So let's start with what USC and Stroud et al. Can do to advance the cause. And you notice in your program it says progress at last with no punctuation at the end. That's not what you see on the screen. So there's some ambivalence, as you will see, the good and the bad, exclamation mark and question mark. Conflicts of interest, although these are of no conflict in my opinion. The AFLAC Foundation, through Cure Search and the Children's Oncology Group, and the National Childhood Cancer Foundation, which was started, I probably should say, by G. Denman Hammond, who had everything to do with this building, because his friend, Ken Norris, is the name of the place. And he was in charge of putting this all together. That's Denny Hammond. We'll get back to Denny. He started the effort. It eventually had us go to AFLAC, and over the last 7 years, almost 8, 1.3, could be 1.5, I may have miscalculated, million, almost $1.5 million have been donated on behalf of AYA Oncology to the Children's Oncology Group and Cure Search. Another conflict is that I am a consultant for Sigma Tau Pharmaceuticals. Not a conflict, but disclosure is what it is. Okay, so this is in honor of G. Denman Hammond, or Denny Hammond, and it's for children under 15. Because although Steve Gruber said, what we can learn, or they heard from others, one in particular this morning, what we can learn from AYA patients can help everyone, especially in the psychosocial arena. But if you go back 50 years, half a century, everything that we learned early on in cancer, and still to this day, came out of the pediatric or childhood cancer experience. So it starts back in 1955, 63 years ago, wrong calculation, over half a century ago. Each one of those bars is a clinical trial of the phase 3 type, meaning comparing 2 or more regimens. These are randomized trials. I'm not showing any of the non-randomized phase 2 trials, phase 1 trials. Each of those bars is the accrual period from the start of entry of patients on the trial until months or years later, closure to entry, and then follow-up. If you count the number of trials, there are 52 of them. And here's what happened nationally to childhood cancer survival under the age of 15. You don't need a p-value for that. You don't need a statistician. I mean, this has been proven in so many settings. The ability to study something is the only way to learn how to move forward. And the clinical trials are the reason that some of you are in this room, having had leukemia or lymphoma, I met some, are sitting in this room. That happens to also be true for all cancer. Actually, I forgot to say, this is acute lymphoblastic leukemia. This is just one disease. It happens to be by far the most common childhood cancer, 30–40% of all cancer in childhood before the age of 15. So it's ALL, which began with the first clinical trials. But what about all cancer? Total cancer in all children less than 15. Each of these columns represents the number of studies, and you get the numbers on the left there, or the number of children who were entered on the studies of the Children's Cancer Group, which of course Denny was the longest chair of, I think 25 years, in the history of the Children's Cancer Group. There are some other bars there that you can't see that have to do with other types of trials, like genetics, learning about biology, translational research, epidemiology trials, a lot of which came out of USC, that's for sure. But if you look at the all cancer, which was tracked a little later than when ALL was followed, you see a similar relationship. The more we study, the more we learn, the better off these young people did. If we looked at the other trials than ALL, because I started with ALL, let's take that out of the old cancer. There's the studies, and there's the correlation. Steady improvement, to this day, in the 5-year survival rate. That's what I showed in the last 3 frames, survival at 5 years from diagnosis. So what about the AYA age group, which you'll hear varyingly depends on the study, but which we usually define as 15 to 39. A lot of arbitrariness in there. Huge difference over those years in psychosocial needs, physical needs. It's probably the most dynamic interval of life. And so many other changes are going on that you can't really just say 15 to 39, but that's the definition. So on the cover of this textbook, which by the way needs to be in a second edition if anybody wants to edit, come see me. This was published in early, 2008, 2008, something like that. And on the cover was a graph that really got us going, and unfortunately is incorrect. All right, each of the bars represents the improvement in the 5-year survival rate. The higher the bar, the greater the average annual increase in the 5-year rate. And I guess I could stop to point out one of these. Let's take this one, 1% for the 45 to 50-year-olds. That means 1% per year over the years that were evaluated, 1975 to 1997, increase in that age group's 5-year survival rate. And so, of course, what you see is the young adults, 20, 25, 30, didn't go anywhere. Over those years, from 1975 to 1977, there was no progress. Well, I said this is incorrect, but it's basically still the problem. And I'll show you what's not quite correct. This isn't actually negative, and it's not down here. It's more along about here, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But the concept, qualitatively, is correct. Now, that was ending in 1997. Let's see if we can update to 2005, because if you're going to evaluate a 5-year survival, you've got to wait 5 years. So 2005 means you wait to 2010. And 2010 is the last date available to us that's been cleaned, made as accurate as possible for the United States. So you can't go beyond 2010. So we're going to try to go up to 2005 or maybe 2006, 2007 with my remaining time. And we're going to analyze that gap from that point of view. Okay. And I will say what's bad about this and what's good about this. First, not so good. What you see here is the number of persons who were entered onto a national clinical trial or at comprehensive cancer centers like the Norris that are under the aegis of the National Cancer Institute, because they keep track of the clinical trial entries at all comprehensive cancer centers. So the total number of accruals per each individual year of age, starting at birth through age 85. And this is the pattern of the number of people in the United States entered on clinical trials, nationally or comprehensive cancer centers, in 2001 to 2003. That's 3 years, about a decade ago. That's the baseline for what I would like you to learn along with me. Notice the pattern. Of course, there are far more people with cancer who are my age, so you would expect this to be that high. But if I tell you right now that only 0.75%, less than 1% of people with cancer in the United States are under the age of 15, and yet this peak ain't 0.75%, you can see how much more the children's groups have done to study the problem. Which is why we said earlier that what we've learned primarily came out of the pediatric experience. Okay, so let's watch what happened a little later. But let's now turn to the right side. When we take the number of persons entered onto trials, knowing the population in each of those individual years of age, we can get an estimate of the percentage of persons with cancer as a function of each single year of age who were on a clinical trial during their cancer experience. So this begins for 2001 to 2003, the same year as about a decade ago. And, oops, that's a little problem, okay. And over here on the right, the peaks are 40 to 50% for, oh, down here. That's the green one, right? That's the green one. Everything's green is on the percentage of approximate proportion on trials. So less than 5% for everybody over the age of 20. Under the age of 20, the percentage is as high as 50%. That was a decade ago. But notice in between, where the least proportion and least number of persons on trials are. Now, I don't have to use the pointer for that. It's about 2% for 20 to 30-year-olds. That's the 2% level. And the peak of the 45-year-olds is at 4%. So a little less than 2% of 20 to 30-year-olds were on clinical trials a decade ago. Now let's move forward a decade. The latest years for which these data are available are 2007 to 2009. We could update this, but in terms of what's available, that's almost a decade later. Now you see in the heavy line a similar pattern 10 years later, or approximately 10 years later, except maybe for something there. And if we look at the percentage of persons in each age group, each individual year of age on trials, you see again, that's the problem with this pointer. All right. I got to go back. I'm not going to use the pointer. It's just the advancement. All right, you see that peak that was, and I guess I have to do it here, that is in the percentage of patients going somewhere from, let's say, 20% up to 35 or so percent. But nothing else has changed. The only progress that's been made is between the ages of 10 and 20. They are the only age groups, and it stops abruptly at 20, who've had an increase in accruals to clinical trials. At 20, there's absolutely no difference over the previous decade. 20 to 30-year-olds are still the lowest age group in terms of percentage on clinical trials, at least up to the age of 65. And then when you get my age, it's really hard to get on a clinical trial for a lot of good reasons and some really pretty unreasonable reasons. Okay. So these are data from Nita, who's here and talked later, and Steve Friedman, Shanda Finnegan, and Mike Montello at the NCI. And I have no idea whether I have any right or approval to present these data, but Nita's seen these, so I think we're okay. Let's go back and look at the percentage of patients on trials and notice that increase that I mentioned. But there's also been, because I think this increase is even more impressive, a decrease of about the same magnitude in the 5 to 10-year-olds. So we really worked hard on making this happen, and maybe at the cost of that. But relatively, we even made more progress. So that's good news. That should be the GOOD slide. What about ALL? Because that was the one I started with, and I have a long-time personal interest. I met somebody here who was treated for ALL with lymphoblastic lymphoma. Now you're looking at the same data for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And what you see, although it's not apparent clearly, is again, we've done some of the increase in cancer in 10 to 20-year-olds with ALL. And that's apparent here with this change. Otherwise, there's really no other difference. Percentages maybe somewhat increase over the adult range. This heavy line is higher than that thin line from years before. But not much change in children or adolescents, although there is some quantitative increase there. So we call this the AYA-ALL accrual cliff. Your job is to get that cliff out of there. I know Congress barely does that, but you can do it better. And I have some ideas at the end to help on that. So here are the categories that have really improved over the previous decade. ALL in the upper right, Hodgkin lymphoma improved, then left sarcoma, and then a whole variety of other diseases. So about a quarter of the increase is just due to ALL alone. Here, getting a little tough to follow along, are the individual cancers beyond the few that I've just described. There are 23 of them that count for 95% of all the cancers between 15 and 39 in the AYA population. And each of those bars is a 5-year survival rate from the day of diagnosis between the ages of 15 to 39 until 5 years later. And they're ordered by the best survival at the top and the worst at the bottom. I haven't identified them, but I want you to look at the worst actors that had the highest number of cases. These are data from 2000 to 2007, and I'll just pick one number. There are 19,281 of this cancer in those years, with a 70% 5-year survival rate. We'll come back to that one. I did highlight everything less than 65% 5-year survival. Got a lot of work to do. Over a third of those don't survive more than 5 years. And I've highlighted the ones that have the largest number of persons in that age group. Let's look at those more closely. Here they are, including the one that had 19,000, that's breast cancer. And then you can follow the numbers all the way down the line. All of these have less than a 65% survival. That's the next place to target your effort. In these diseases, large numbers of patients, especially the ones that were in red, with less than the 65% survival, some as low as 20, 25, 30%, including a childhood cancer, right? Come on. A childhood cancer, they're about 3 millimeters apart. I've got a tremor too, I think. I didn't know I had, but I proved it. Right. So right there is rhabdomyosarcoma with a 40% survival rate. Anybody less than 15 has an average 85 to 90% survival rate with rhabdomyosarcoma. There's a cliff for you, and one cancer that we do so well in children. All right, let's look a little bit more. Now I've listed all of them on the left, but this time it's for stage 4. So it's one thing to just take all the stages, as we did in a couple slides, and now it's different to look at the worst actors, those who have metastatic disease that's already spread beyond where it started in the primary part of the body, the primary tumor. Now you see almost everybody's less than 65%, and some of them are really low with only a few percent survival at 5 years, even at 1 year at the bottom. I've got one more thing to show on this, which I just got through doing this morning. The black are the data from the previous slide, which is the distant or metastatic disease. The green is all stages. So the worst actors are in black. The green is everybody with that cancer. And you can see how variable having metastatic disease is in terms of making your situation worse. Dave himself had Hodgkin lymphoma. Here's an interesting perspective. Let's look for it. Hodgkin lymphoma, 90% survival, we're all stages, 85% for stage 4. What happened to Dave Stroud? Why didn't a transplant, much less 2, help him? How about those 480 days he spent, most of them in the PICU at CHLA, where we treat kids better? Why? That's something for genomics to answer, because he didn't follow that pattern. Even with distant disease, he should have had a better chance. He had to be one of those 15% who weren't going to live 5 years, but he didn't go half that in terms of time allowed. All right, then what was on the front cover of the book was the average annual percentage increase in the 5-year survival rate. Now I'm taking, in the upper left, the best prognosis groups that were at the top of the previous slides, including Hodgkin lymphoma, which Dave should have survived. I got the sign. I got 20 minutes to go, or 20 minutes? I've used up 20. Okay. Good. Yeah, we started way late. So this is the best actors. They're in that group of 4: Hodgkin lymphoma, melanoma, cancer of the thyroid, cancer of the testis. 80, 90, 95% survival rates. So has there been a change in that age group, and that with those diseases among 15 to 39-year-olds over that? Now, different interval. This is the more recent data, 1990 to 2004, which is about as far forward as we can go. And you see progress, although in a minimal way, in the best groups. And that's good news. Although I worry about this a little bit, with the worst improvement in the 15 to 25-year-olds. 20, yeah. What about everybody else? Take those away. Just take 4. Now you've got 19 left of the 23. Although for reasons that I haven't got time to explain, Kaposi sarcoma and non-Hodgkin lymphoma during the 1980s and 1990s, when HIV and AIDS killed a lot of young men, many of them died because they got that cancer, either Kaposi sarcoma or non-Hodgkin lymphoma. That's what's wrong with the slide on the the graph on the chart of the front cover of that book, because it included those. And that made that age group look worse because they had Kaposi sarcoma. If you don't include those years when AIDS and HIV killed a lot of our citizens, then you can see the progress. But if you do include them, it looks a lot worse. So here we've now looked at everybody else except Kaposi sarcoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, because there's still a problem in the 1990s, which is what this starts at. And you see the group that's had the least progress. The good news is they've had some. The bars are above the 0, but the least progress, again, is in the 20 to 30-year-olds. Okay, I got to take a little jump to this. Here's a new finding that really concerns me and those that I work with in the adult oncology world, especially over the age of 40. Thyroid cancer incidence in the United States in 15 to 39-year-olds. They had a very high survival rate. You saw it was about 90. It was at the top of the chart. It was 95+%, 5 years. Here's the incidence of thyroid cancer in the United States in this age group, beginning in 1970 or 75 through the most recent year available data. Huge increase. A reverse cliff, or cliff up. And yet, the thyroid cancer death rate hasn't changed. It's gone down a little in the early years, but in the last years it hasn't changed. Hasn't changed. So what are we diagnosing in young people that hasn't changed their mortality or their expectancy? This is an epidemic, not of disease, but of diagnosis. Because it's not disease that's underneath that cliff. It's overdiagnosis. It's diagnosing something that isn't going to hurt that person in the rest of his or her life. And most of these are females because thyroid cancer is much more common, so in her or his life. Overdiagnosis. These are in the data as thyroid cancer, but it's not cancer. Everything under that cliff is probably not cancer. So it makes the survival look even better because it inflates the proportion that didn't have cancer to have even better outcome. And that's not only true for thyroid cancer, it's true for breast cancer and melanoma and probably others. Here are those cancers that the proportion of all cancer in the same age group, 39, that are indolent, that are not cancer. They're got a new word for it, and you've got to learn this. It's called IDLE, I-D-L-E. We used to use the word incidentaloma, but the proper term now is IDLE. UCSF had a lot to do with this. Indolent lesion of epithelial origin. That's what we're diagnosing now. Indolent disease or indolent non-disease. So that's affecting how we look at these data. So the bad and good is there on the left are all those that have had no significant improvement from 1985 to 2000. Sorry, who had significant improvement, that's the good. And on the right are the cancers, the majority that are not. Okay, we're wrapping up under-recognized awareness. I want to do something else. Here's that 0.75% of all cancer under the age of 15. It's 1.8% in the next 15 years, and it's 5.8%, much, much more. So that when you look at these data, it's not a 1% problem that you're dealing with, it's a 6% problem. And there are more years of life affected, and I'll show you that. Actually, I'll show it here. If you take 15 and less than 15-year-olds, that's the number of million of life years saved because of diagnosis at an early age. And if you look at the 15 to 39-year-olds and their average survival, taking all those cancers, figuring out what their average 5-year survival, 10-year, 15 years survival, you come up with about 2 million years of life saved. So it's not just 1% or 6%. It's the number of years of life saved because a young person has a much longer lifespan. And there's so many more of them that it pales by comparison with respect to children, something we used to always say about kids. And last thing, There are all kinds of different cancers depending on the age group, but they're unique to AYAs. Underneath this yellow triangle are cancers that occur at no other age. So trying to train young people who are either in pediatrics or adult medicine to do something that bridges over both age groups and yet is unique to that age group. And we train them on carcinomas of the lung, colorectum, prostate, breast, GU, GI, et cetera, or in children, neuroblastoma, embryonal tumors, and then miss that age group in between is another challenge for USC and Stroud. I'm going to skip the insurance issue and just go to the last two slides. Turf gap. That's a turf gap. USC's here, CHLA is about 25 to 65 minutes away, depending on it. Okay, but it's away, all right? You don't have this problem, I don't think, but many centers don't collaborate like the Children's Hospital University, especially not in the private sector. So there's a turf gap. And I represent it this way. Each of those are the percentage of that cancer in the age group. So it's the prevalence of the type of cancer. Let's pick the one at the top here, the purple one. That's Hodgkin lymphoma. So Hodgkin lymphoma has its greatest percentage of patients right there in the AYA range. And then all the others, which you've already seen, bone sarcoma, soft tissue sarcoma, metastasis, this is the age at which it occurs. And yet we train for this group, and we train for this group, and don't really train for the group that's got that type of tumors. It's been like that. That's the way society's been organized. This is civilization, and that's what's happened. So now you bring it back together, but with that comes, let me back up to conflict. Because you got to figure out how to do this together. There's your goal, and your program can accomplish that. Beat them to the punch. All right, I wanted to get on with just one more last thing because I'm out of here. All right, so form a statewide alliance. Texas has done this. They've had annual conferences. Or even better yet, because I'm in a state in the north, and there's that great group up in Washington, which you're going to hear about, do the western states while you're at it. Let's all do this together. Headquartered here, or Portland, but get it moving. Partner with Critical Mass. I'm not sure USC was represented there per se. So be one of the primary members. You're going to hear from its CEO. Cultivate celebrity. You got the best place in the world to do that. Don't let St. Jude's do it. Find somebody better. This is what we did in Houston, because that's where he lives. He donated $1.7 million to get the George Foreman unit open for adolescent young adults. Call it what you like, but get that physical plan, which I don't think I know that you've got here yet. There was a separate waiting room, recreational educational sanctuary, off limits to everybody else, and yet it's open all day long, all night for every day of the year. Make sure you do everything you can to get every sophisticated software, every hashtag available to every one of those young adults, but don't go in there. Don't go in there. And then get the humor. You got to get the humor. Heidi Adams has this great cartoon that shows a man having a manogram. I want you to explain that later, Heidi. But the humor's got to come with this. And there it is. That was the one that George Foreman put together in Houston. So it's a new frontier. It's a new discipline. It's called AYA Oncology. But everybody's using just AYA and thinking it's oncology. You can do this for nephrology, for endocrinology, cardiology. This is the model, not just for cancer, but for all of your other specialty divisions. This was taken by a friend of Denny Hammond's, T. Tartikoff, at the ages of 16 and 17. This was a year later. That's really what it's all about. So thank you for your attention, and for the Strouds especially. Time's up, it says.